Hello, I'm Michel Gagné, and you are listening to the Real-Time Visual Effects Podcast, where wizards reside.
You have a gift. You have a passion for creation. There's something inside you that wants to express itself, and that something has led you to explore the world of visual effects, a place where magic happens, and the only limitation is your imagination. All the greatest artists in the world started somewhere, learning and growing into the people they are today. You being here is the first step to building your legacy as an artist. Learn from the best and brightest in the real-time visual effects community. Sharpen your skills and be your best self. Hey everybody, today's episode features an interview with Ashley Lyons. He is a Team Lead VFX supervisor at Gearbox Software, and he's worked on amazing titles like Battleborn, Borderlands 3, and Neverwinter Nights. Ash is an amazing and likable fellow who manages a full job taking care of other VFX artists while having a family of his own. Super excited to share his amazing story with you today. Everything from sculpting to VFX where he is today. With that said, let's dive in.
Here is your host, Travis McCallum.
Hey everybody, today I have Ashley Lyon, a senior visual effects artist at Gearbox Software. He's worked on amazing titles like the Borderlands franchise, and before he worked on a massive MMORPG called Neverwinter on both environmental and character effects. Ashley, how you doing today, man?
I'm good. Had some coffee. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to kick it.
Now you're here in Dallas, Texas, alongside with me, so how's the weather over on your side?
Hot. I haven't been outside yet, but the more I look at it, it looks hot. It was hot last night, so it'll probably be hot today.
Yep, sounds like a Texas day in the life.
Yeah.
Ashley, I want to jump into all of the cool things that you have done in the past and maybe what you've just finished up. I know you had a recent expansion at Borderlands that you did. But to begin with, how did you get started in visual effects?
Well, I guess long story short, it was almost by accident, really, because I graduated from college with a sculpture degree. And at that point, I was like, well, I want to be a gallery artist. That was like my thing. I was like, I want to get into galleries. I want to build sculptures. I want to be, that person, which didn't really pan out too well because once I graduated, I was like, all right, now what do? I have this degree. I don't know where to go. I was like, I don't even know how to get into a gallery. So I ended up coaching cheerleading for like 3 years down in North Carolina. And then at that point, I realized I was like, all right, I can't coach for the rest of my life. Like I need to do something. And then I decided to basically just go back to school. So I found this school that taught like visual effects and graphic design. It was a graduate program. It was like, oh, I'm going to be a graphic designer. That'd be awesome. I'll get my name up on, not my name, like I'll get my designs up on giant billboards or like get into some commercials or whatever. But I accidentally checked like the visual effects mark and sent them my application. They call me back like, hey, we got your application. We just want to like double check some things. And like, so we see that you're interested in the visual effects area. And I was like, yeah, sure. Okay. I'll do that. Because I mean, at that point, like I really had no idea. Like I had no idea what like type of visual effects were at the time. And I was like, okay, yeah, visual effects, that sounds cool. So then I ended up going to grad school for visual effects, and I ended up really, really liking it. And this is like the type of visual effects for like movies, like Hollywood commercial stuff like that, like all the pre-rendered stuff. And so I did that graduate program for 2 years, and I really liked it. I was like, wow, this is awesome. I'm making fire. I can blow stuff up. This is great. And then once I graduated, I got a job doing basically modeling furniture at this company in Chicago, which was a good introduction to, I guess, my professional life because, learning how to hit deadlines and, work with a team and things like that. But I wasn't actually doing any visual effects. It was like 90% modeling of just furniture for like rendering and like brochures and catalogs and things like that. And so I was doing that for about 4 years or so. And then while I was there, they had asked me if I wanted to start working with their animation team because like they had built up this small animation team of like 4 or 5 people. And they were like, okay, well, we're going to need someone to kind of come in and do our simulation stuff, like our liquids or anything like breaking apart, things like that. So I was like, okay, cool. Yeah. Hey, I have a degree that lets me do that. So it was like, 3 years later, I was like, hey, I can finally use this graduate degree that I paid all this money for. All right. So I'm doing that. And after a while, I'm going, you know what, I'm kind of bored. I'm not really going anywhere with this. It's cool, but it's not really pushing my boundaries. I'm not excelling. So I decided to look for a new job that was out in, at least I found a job in California working in a game studio. And gaming was never something that I had thought about in the past. It's like I always wanted to get into Hollywood and do those like massive movie effects, working on like Avengers, something like working at ILM was like my dream. I was like, I want to go to ILM. So seeing a video game studio saying, hey, we need visual effects artists, that's something that never even crossed my mind. I was like, gaming visual effects? What is that? Oh my God. So I applied and they hired me. They were interested. So it was just, I just jumped in. And then when I got to doing the gaming stuff, that really took over as, oh my God, this is what I want to do. Like, this is it, real-time effects. Like, the pre-rendered stuff is cool, it's fun, but the real-time effects, like, I'm enjoying it way too much. And that was like the seed that, spawned like where I am now. It's just getting, like finding that studio in California and having them just hire me and then just go, all right, this is real-time effects, go for it. And
wow.
I just kind of grabbed on and was like, this is it. This is, until, how old was I? Like 27, 28, when I finally realized, oh, this is what I can do for the rest of my life.
So making that shift from movie visual effects to real-time visual effects, what are some of those like key differences that really kind of drew the allure for you and said, video games are so much more interesting?
It was just the instant feedback of the effect, because when you're working in real-time effects, it's real time, so you're making changes and you see them right there. It's the iteration time is a lot faster, so you can, like, you're creating at the speed of your creativity, if that makes any sense. So it's like you're thinking something, boom, do, there it is on screen. Versus where you're with the pre-rendered stuff, it's okay, I'm going to make this change, update it, wait 20 minutes for this to simulate, depending on, I guess, whatever you're doing, maybe 20 minutes, whatever. But it's like, okay, 20 minutes later, no, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Let me go back and type in some more numbers. Okay, wait another 10 minutes. Oh, okay, no, that wasn't what I wanted to do. Go back, type in some more numbers. And it was just the feedback loop for me I enjoy real-time effects just a lot more, just because it's iterating on stuff is faster.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And I definitely feel like from the feedback I've heard from other people, real-time visual effects are things that people in movies and film are trying to adopt in their workflow because of the exact reason you described. You want that feedback instantaneously, because spending 2 hours, 8 hours, 24 hours waiting for one single render that may or may not pan out to what you see in your mind, that's just not becoming feasible to keep up with today's standards. So I guess kind of the lesson there is that real-time visual effects starts maybe in games, but it's expanding in other industries as well. So as a skill set, it's incredibly invaluable.
Oh yeah, and it's funny because a lot of the times, what you said, like the real time is, getting into inspiring Hollywood and, movies to try to get that same feedback loop. Whereas like the film industry also inspires real time effects to achieve the look that they have. Because, you look at games now and it's like, oh my God, that's real time? Are you serious? Like, how do they do that?
When you first started out in the industry and looking where you are today, what are some things that you wish you had known starting out?
How much software I would have to know, just like how fast that software changes. Because when I first started out in grad school, basically, like my idea, even though I was learning visual effects, I wanted to be a modeler. So I was really focusing on a lot of my modeling classes during those times. And my whole thing was like, oh, I want to be a character modeler. I love getting into ZBrush and doing, XYZ and all this stuff, which was cool. And then when I started to shift focus into VFX, I started to realize, I was like, oh my God, there's so much software you need to know. And it changes like every year. Some new software comes out that's going to be like the new hotness. I don't want to say you're expected to know it, but it's like you need to know it, because like the studio that you might be applying for, they might want you to know Houdini. Right now, Houdini is a really hot piece of software to learn, and if you know it, like that's awesome. However, right now, like Emberjet is on the come up, and that might be like next year, it might be, okay, do you know Houdini and Imbergen? And then next, like the year after that, it might be some other software. It's like, hey, do you know this software instead? So it's like you need to constantly be learning all this stuff. I mean, on top of like, the usual suspects like Photoshop and After Effects, like Unreal or Unity. All this you need to know. And if I would have known that, I would have back then, it's something that I just would have been, I just wasn't expecting.
Cool. I definitely understand how the learning never stops, and you have to be driven and motivated in your craft to keep learning. Otherwise, you will burn out. And I think Bill mentioned it earlier, like as you get older, sometimes you end up shifting your focus from doing the work to maybe going into supervision or teaching others. So finding that balance. And I wonder, as you described right here, is this just kind of like a VFX kind of thing, or does it like apply into other industries when you're talking about like being a sculptor? Are there always new tools there as well? Or is it typically, pretty stable and static?
I'm not really sure about that, but I mean, I can tell you just from what I know, and I don't necessarily want to like talk me out of turn or anything here, but just from my experience seeing, like, for example, like I said, I want to be a character modeler, and just seeing how a lot of people are still using ZBrush or Mudbox when they're modeling. I mean, and that software has been around for 10 years now, at least. And like people are still using that. And I haven't personally seen new software for modeling.
Right. And we can think of it too, just from a VFX position within a game development company. You are literally interacting with every single person on a team. You're working with animators, with the programmers, because you have to have both the technical expertise in tools, but also the creative, expertise in tools. And melding those together, there's such a huge amount of different tools that you use. So do you have any advice to maybe aspiring people that want to like figure out which tools they need to learn and like how to kind of navigate that without becoming overwhelmed? That's a lot to think about.
Yeah, I mean, my advice whenever someone's like, well, what do I need to learn? I just tell them everything. And if you want to break it down to kind of a more granular level, it's like you want to learn the basics. There's like the basic few programs like Photoshop and Unreal or Unity, learning like Houdini, like I said earlier. And if you don't know Houdini, learn Max or Maya. Like basically you want to find the core software that basically every studio is using, know those, and at least be familiar with the other ones. I wouldn't expect anyone to know everything, because I mean, I don't know everything, because I'm just I'm an average guy. Like, I'm not a super genius. I'm not a super coder that can go in and be like, oh, I know how to do this, type, done. So it's like, you need to just at least learn the core, be familiar with the rest, I would say.
Faux show, Ash, faux show.
Yeah.
Hey, so all of us have successes in our life, but some of the biggest learning moments is when we fail at something. So I was wondering if you could share a story about maybe something that you failed at and how you handled it and learned from that experience.
Yeah, so I would say one of the things, I wouldn't really call this a failure, but it's more of something that I wish I could do better, is coding, or just programming in general, because I've never been able to grab on to code language. It's just, I don't know. It's like, I guess it's just the way my brain works is I wasn't able to grasp the concept of coding. Even when I took a coding class in school, it was like, I got a C, like I barely passed it. And it's just something I wish I could do better. And I try, like I can look at a piece of code and kind of go, okay, I get what they're doing. But if you were to ask me to write one, I'm all thumbs on that, I guess. But in order to, I guess, get better at it is whenever I do see any sort of coding challenge, it is something that I will like kind of hyper focus on and try to learn, hey, this is, it's a piece of code. I'm going to do what I can to figure out how to problem solve this, like myself.
And what does it mean when you say hyper focus? What does that mean?
It'll just be the thing that I'll be thinking about like all day. But if another task comes in and it's that task will kind of get pushed to the back of my mind, because I'm like, I want to figure out how I can solve this. And then that's just what I'm just focused on, basically. Like, for example, if I'm trying to do something in Houdini and I know that I'm going to need to write a piece of Vex code for it, that'll be the thing that I'm researching all day. And like I said, because I'm not so great at code, it's going to take me a long time just to figure out, how to achieve what I want. And then once I'm done, it's like, oh, cool, I figured it out. Now I can go work on the other things that I need to do.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said you try and do research on whatever kind of problem you're trying to solve. And 100%, Ash, when even professional programmers out there in the field still go to Google search.
Yeah.
And, they use documentation and reference to find the answers that they need to whatever kind of, complex programming that they need to do, because there is so much syntax and code involved in it that no one, unless you're like Superman, can remember everything that's going on. So I totally see the need to rely on, others. And the internet is such a powerful tool, like you're talking about a toolbox, to help us become better coders every day. But thinking about it just for a moment, you mentioned in Houdini, as an FX artist in the real-time space, where would we actually want to use code, and how are you maybe using it in your day-to-day workflow when you have to?
Well, a lot of it's, since I'm not a tech artist, I know our tech art department, they use Houdini a lot, and there's a lot of code that they're producing, which helps us out on the VFX side. But me personally, a lot of the code that I use, it's very basic. It's just like taking my normals, randomizing them, and making the normals a velocity, basing my velocity on the normal, on a randomized normal, and then making an explosion out of that. So a lot of that's very basic, and like I said, it's basic stuff. I'm not creating anything crazy for the game, but a lot of it's just kind of trying to get my simulations to look certain ways. I'll write a couple lines of code to have the just chrome noise or some sort of randomized noise. I'm not doing anything crazy, but it's but like I said, since I'm not great at it, I'm going how do I do this? So I was look it up. It's okay, that's how I randomize my normals.
Yeah. Hey, so now that you've kind of moved into this position as a senior visual effects artist, oftentimes you're working with other effects artists and looking at their work. I also know you're on Twitter a lot, looking at other people's work as well, and maybe some other places. So I'm curious, when you're looking at other people's work, and maybe even your own, what are the things you're looking at that make great effects? And how do you kind of help them make their effects even better?
Good question. Let me correct you real quick. So I was a lead, I was a senior, but now I'm a lead artist. So I'm actually in charge of our team now.
And for my own understanding and maybe other people's, semantics, does it matter what titles are? Is that a studio by studio, or is it kind of an industry standard? Or
it's a little, right now it's an industry standard. As when you're senior level, it's just it's the experience. Basically, you have the junior level is kind of someone who's brand new in the industry, first couple years. Then you get to senior levels when you've been there for a while. You shift a couple titles, so you have that experience. As a lead, you're actually managing the team. So, for example, my role as lead at Gearbox is kind of 50% creating assets, and then 50% managing our team, sending out tasks, making sure that we are going in the proper direction for visual fidelity for the game. Like I said, it's a 50-50 split. So that would be the difference between junior, senior, and lead.
Gotcha. What's after that?
After that, I think art director, you can pretty much hit, it's lead level, and then after that you go into not work in the visual effects department anymore. It's you just
become the CEO of your own.
Yeah. Okay. You start your own company and then you go on for that. But yeah, I'm not interested in starting my own studio. That seems like a massive headache and a half.
That's what Embergen did.
Yeah.
Nick.
Oh yeah.
All right, so back to the questions, circling. We were asking, what are some of the things you look in other people's work to help them make better effects?
The few main things that I do look at is timing, color theory, how they're using color, making sure that their effects have a punch to them. And if they tell a story, to quote, tell a story, meaning, is there an anticipation? Is there build up to the effect? Where is this effect? What's it doing? What's its purpose? Is it just, there's a difference between an impact effect versus an explosion, even though you might use the same assets, but each one is going to tell a different story of what it's supposed to be doing. A lot of the times, because I also teach part-time, and when I'm telling my students, okay, you guys are building these effects, timing is everything, because you want to have, for example, if you're doing an impact or an explosion, you don't just want to have your effect just go pop. It's you want to have it maybe spark, have a quick spark, and then a slow build up, and then the giant pop. So maybe a up, it's something there's boom. And And I think that right there is a difference. And timing is like the difference between just an effects artist and a great effects artist, because it's like the smaller details that you really want to get into.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Now that you've been out here for, how long have you been working as a professional VFX artist?
Decade-ish.
10 plus years.
Yeah, basically.
What are some of the trends that you're seeing out in the industry, and what's currently got your curiosity?
Right now, my curiosity is going towards Niagara. That seems to be making some waves among the real-time VFX community and people playing around with Niagara. And my personal experience with Niagara is I've been able to use it for, like, personally about a month or like maybe 1 or 2 months right now. And just seeing what it's capable of, and even in its current state, just seeing what you can do with it, it's pretty incredible.
And just to give some context to our audience, Niagara is the new particle system in Unreal Engine's. So it's the predecessor to Cascade, and they just went production ready in version 4.25. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so seeing what Niagara is capable of, and just all on that front, and I have, like I said, I have very limited experience right now personally, but there are like YouTube videos out there, people using Niagara to do all this, like, oh look, I dissolved this mesh and all this really awesome GPU particles flying everywhere. I'm like, that is cool. I've been trying to do that for years, and now we can. And I've been trying to come up with a cool way to do that, and it's like, oh, cool. And that's it. So it's like I'm really interested in seeing where Niagara can go. I love seeing Vertex animated stuff. Like, that's Vertex animations, bringing that into Unreal, just coming from the pre-rendered effects background and seeing that now in Unreal now is awesome. Because back when we were working on Battleborn was like my first AAA game. And when I was starting there, I was talking to some of our tech guys, and I'm like, hey, I want to do this, this, and this, because I've done this in pre-rendered stuff. And they're like, well, we can't really do that. I was like, really? Oh, that sucks. And then now it's like, hey, we can do that now. It's like, yeah, we can do that.
I don't want to boost their ego too much over at Unreal at Epic, but just the UI alone with Niagara is so nice. Like, you can really kind of like make as many different nodes or little boxes as you want and rearrange them in whatever kind of shapes you can keep track of, like where the different emitters are within a single system. So that's super cool. So shifting gears, I want to kind of dive into what a day in the life of Ash looks like from sunrise to sunset. What's that like for you?
I'll do like a work day. So as you know, I have 2 kids. I have a family. A lot of it revolves around them. So I'll wake up in between the hours of like either 5 to 8, depending on when my 1-year-old decides to open his eyes. Definitely get some coffee, because coffee is life now. It's funny, I didn't really start drinking coffee until I had children. That was a new life experience. But I'll definitely get some coffee. I'll eat some breakfast, and then now that I'm working from home, like, half the country, I guess, the commute is a lot easier. Getting into work. So now I just walk down the hall and sit at my desk. I'll just check emails, make sure I got everything on task, make sure everything is going in the right direction. Most likely jumping into a bunch of meetings in the morning. And then during the afternoon, I will start actually creating game assets. Get that done. Around 5 or 6 is usually my when I start to clock out. I'll go exercise for a bit, and then it's family time for the rest of the night. Like, my life is actually pretty boring. Yeah, I don't really do much now that it's all work from home. I mean, in the before COVID times, it was even the same. You could just add in a 30-minute drive to work.
Yeah, I know over at Gearbox, they have their own like personal coffee shop, Nerdvana.
Yeah.
So that was a really nice place where they got this board game set up, and you can just hang out with other people and, sip on your drink and, just ease into the day. That's awesome, man. And I'm in the same boat. I do a morning Starbucks run, and that's the only time I leave the house, during the weekdays.
Well, my wife bought an espresso machine almost a year ago, and we've been like killing that thing. Every morning it's like espresso. In the afternoon, espresso.
So do y'all get on like Zoom calls with your team during your meetings and, just kind of like, what do y'all talk about? Or if you're not allowed to talk about that, I understand.
Oh, well, I mean, it's just typical meetings. It's the same as if we were in the office, but instead it's like, hey, everyone get on this group chat, and then we all start, discussing things and then like sharing screens and trying to get as much information out with each other as possible. And it's kind of like a double-edged sword, I guess, everyone working from home. And because now that we do have access to each other easier, because it's just like type. Hey man, what's up? I need this, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But now but you can't just get up and walk over to their desk and, actually talk to them and show them, hey, I need exactly this here.
Mm-hmm.
What is this file? And you point to it, and now it's like, I got to give you a screenshot or share my screen and then show you. So it's easier to get in contact with someone, but it's also more challenging to exchange information.
If it was up to you, would you prefer to continue working from home, or do you prefer the office?
I would like maybe a 70-30 split where we'd be able to go in the office in like 4 days out of the week and then stay home on like Wednesday or Friday, or just stay home one day.
Yeah.
Like designate some day just to stay home and just, not deal with it.
Especially with a 1-year-old, right?
Yeah. One and a 4-year-old, which I think you can hear him knocking on my door right now.
I hear a little dog.
Yeah. Him too. Yeah. I got a full house here. But yeah, I mean, it'd be great if like just being able to work from home for one day. And, sometimes it's easier when you're at home, because when you're in the office, depending on, I guess, your role at the studio, people are going to come by and, ask you questions. So like they know you're at your desk. If you need to like really focus on something for the day and you've got 10 or 20, distractions, it gets a little hard just to get that one thing done. So I think being at home, the distractions are less,
Right. I was wondering if you could maybe talk us through a workflow that you use for creating a visual effect from start to finish. And maybe you can draw from a past effect that you've done as a personal passion project, or maybe something you've done on one of your previous games.
Current workflow. So one effect that always comes to mind, kind of whenever I get asked, like, what was your favorite effect, or what was your most challenging effect? I would say if you look back into like the Battleborn days, the character Beatrix, that was the last DLC character that I made. And in that character, we had liquid. So like there was this, basically the character's arm is this big giant syringe. And the designers and the concept artists for this were like, hey, we want to have this liquid sloshing around in her syringe. And at the time, I had no idea how to do this. I don't even know if I can pull that off. And the whole like this concept to ship kind of process was, I took like 4 months to kind of create that one material just to get that effect, because it wasn't just the look, it was also, it needed to react to her firing. So like it was like an ammo counter almost. Like when her ammo ran out, the liquid would drop, periodically, and then the vial would be emptied, and then she'd reload and the vial would fill back up. And also it also needed to change color depending on the skill, and that also needed to react to like her movement and firing and all that. So starting out, I had a picture in my mind, I had the concept art to what kind of how it would look, and then basically the research part of it, which was, like I said, like a month of like kind of just figuring out R&D, and then another like 2 or 3 months of actually getting it to work and getting that whole like material chain working properly. So that process took a while, and then obviously trying to get into game and testing it and all that. Yeah, so that way, I mean, it's just basically just go with like research, and then R&D, research, and then implementation. Sometimes I'll hit my sketchbook to kind of sketch things out. I don't draw as much as I used to. I used to be a great artist. Now I try to draw something and it's like, oh my God, really? I went to school for this? So like sometimes I hit the sketchbook and draw out what I want, and then put that into paper. Put that onto into the game and getting that out, and then yeah.
So just curious, for that liquid effect you did for the vial, what were some of the tools that you used? Was it all just shader driven, or did you use particle systems? Or
that was all shader driven, and it was straight up material work. Getting into 3ds Max, like to model the liquid itself, and then putting that into the vial and getting just getting the material to work. I mean, that shader was like a mile long. I had to scroll through the material editor just to figure things out. The end result, I was pretty happy with the end result. I mean, it didn't get exactly to where I wanted it, but I was able to fake it enough to where I was like, all right, I can ship with this.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I want to talk about your time working on the Borderlands franchise and Battleborn over at Gearbox. But can you just give us a little bit of a explanation? What is Borderlands? What's kind of the idea behind it?
The idea behind Borderlands is the whole like looter shooter. We're taking the Diablo style of dungeon crawling and loot gathering and adding it into, or merging it with an FPS, and getting that whole kind of cartoony vibe to it, like over the topness and just kind of goofiness, and like adding it all, putting it in a blender and putting it into a game.
And its art style really stands out. So thinking about how you created effects for it, can you kind of share with us maybe some of the effects that you ended up making and what you felt like your biggest challenge or your biggest accomplishment was?
Okay, so when it comes to Borderlands, so Borderlands 3 was my first, I would say it was my first real Borderlands game, because I did some effects for the pre-sequel, but that was when I was just hired on to Gearbox, so I was only on the pre-sequel for maybe a month before that was done. And then, we went into Battleborn, and then it was, Borderlands 3. So getting into Borderlands 3 is being first introduced to that art style specifically, because with Battleborn and Borderlands are totally different art styles. So kind of making that switch into the Borderlands aesthetic was a little challenging, because I was so used to just the animated style and cartoony style of Battleborn. And getting into the Borderlands, I had to totally switch the mindset of all right, this is going to be a little bit leaning more realistic, kind of hyper realistic, over the top, but still realistic effects. So we've got to use a lot of simulations, a lot of simulated flip books and things like that. But I would say one of my biggest achievements for Borderlands 3 was working on the Zane character, the Zane Vault Hunter, because that was, as my first Borderlands game, now it's I got my own Vault Hunter to use, which I was like, oh sweet, I get my own Vault Hunter. That's awesome. I'm going to make this guy great. And I guess throughout development, as I was at Gearbox, I always leaned more towards the techie, not necessarily cyberpunk, but more of the tech type of effects. Not tech effects, but techie type of effects, where you got computer screens and dials and vertex things moving around. So that was I always tended to kind of lean towards a lot of that in my effects. So when they came out with, hey, here's the concept art for Zane, I was like, yo, I want that guy. He looks cool. I'm going to take him. So that was actually a pretty big achievement, because it was, all right, you have this character. He is the main character. People are going to be playing him. They're going to be looking at your effects all day, all game, make them look good. So that was actually pretty challenging in itself. And then also, in addition to that, we wanted to redo the whole gore effects for Borderlands 3, because in Borderlands 2, I know we kind of pulled back a little bit on the gore, even though Borderlands 1, there was a lot of gore. Borderlands 2, there wasn't as much. So in Borderlands 3, we wanted to kind of bring that gore back, but we wanted to make it better. We didn't want to just keep reusing the same stuff that we were using for Borderlands 1 and 2. Mm-hmm. And I was tasked with creating, kind of reconfiguring the gore effects, which I'm pretty happy with how they came out, because that was also my first foray into using Houdini to create liquid. And on a side note, anything water related, I suck at. I am not very good with water. I think it's one of my biggest weaknesses with anything liquid. So whenever I'm given a task to make a liquid effect, that's one of those things that, like I said, I'll hyper focus on it and go, okay, this is one of my weaknesses. I know it's one of my weaknesses. So I'm going to make this effect, this water effect, one of my strengths. I'm going to really focus and make this thing look good, because I know I'm not so great at it.
A lot of people struggle with liquids.
Yeah.
So just thinking from your mindset, you said that you feel like you suck at it. Why do you think it's so much more of a challenge, say, over fire or air or earth? Like, what makes it so difficult?
I think it's because the liquid nature of it. It's like it's water, so it has to move a certain way. It has to look a certain way. You got to get like the reflections right. You have to get the evaporation right, or like the erosion right. And it's just one of those things because as humans, we see water. We know what water looks like. We know how it moves. So if you're going to have water move a way that water doesn't move, or any type of liquid move, someone's going to go, that doesn't look right. Now, that's a little off to me. Whereas versus fire is pretty general. It's, you have a lot of some red, some oranges, make a lot of noise. It's going to move a little bit crazy. It's like, okay, yeah, it's fire. For like Earth, we have systems in place that will simulate gravity and collision. So you take a couple of rocks, you drop them on the ground, they bounce. It's like, okay, yeah, that's the way a rock works. But when you're getting into liquids, you got to have like sloshing and it reacting with the movement or gravity. It has to evaporate a certain way. There's like so many factors getting into just how the liquid's gonna live and die that there's many steps to where you can get it wrong and have it look ridiculous,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like all those fundamental principles of what makes great design, shape, color, contrast, all that jazz. And liquids really have to follow like the rules of nature so stringently to get that realism effect, as opposed to the other side of the spectrum, you've got lightning. And lightning, you could do whatever the hell you want with, and it's still going to look like lightning.
Right. It's things like I love making electrical effects, because you can kind of go all out and go crazy with it. And it's like, yeah, it's electricity. Or like fire. Like I love doing fire and explosions because you can make an explosion or a fire look otherworldly and people will still know, okay, yeah, that's fire. But even if you're going to make an otherworldly type of liquid, it still needs to react and look like a liquid. Because then people are going to go, yeah, but liquid doesn't work that way. Even though it's otherworldly or it's magical, it's still like has to globulate, has to glob together and move like wavy like. They're just gonna go, yeah, but that's not a liquid. Like that's not a liquid that I'm used to. So I'm gonna say that's not liquid.
A side note here on our podcast, the opening voice we hear is Michael Gagne, and he's a prolific artist who's done amazing work. I know that he worked alongside you on Battleborn. I was wondering if maybe you could share your experience with Michel. I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. My bad. And kind of what you learned during your time with him.
Oh man, Michel is an awesome guy. Like, mad props to Michel. He's awesome. Working with him on Battleborn was definitely an experience. I learned a lot from him. So Battleborn was my first introduction to Michel's art. I had never known what he had, like the movies that he had worked on or any of his animations. But once I met him and the team introduced me and kind of showed me his portfolio, I was like, oh my God, I've seen all those movies. Like he did that, He's also such a nice guy. Like he is a legit awesome person. Working side by side with him and just seeing his animations and being able to break those down, I learned a lot about timing. And that was like, I would say without like working with Michel, a lot of my effects nowadays wouldn't be where they are, because being able to see his animations and actually having the flip books in front of me and looking at them day after day after day and breaking them down, I was able to see like how he does his timing when he's making certain explosive pops, or like how he would swirl a shape into another shape, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can take that and kind of incorporate that into what I'm doing over here. And like I think like one of the biggest things that, and I still use this technique to this day, is if you ever look at any of the, like whenever he does like a pop, like a quick flash, you'll see he does these like really cool random shapes, like a split second before you have like this giant explosion. And that is something that I'll incorporate into a lot of my quick flashy explosive effects. Like I'll have this random kind of star shape or like this random like kind of swirly shape that just kind of quickly flashes, and then you get like that giant effect after it, which is something that I never even thought about until I saw Michel draw it out. I was like, hey, I like that. That's cool. I'm going to start using that technique.
That's awesome, man. Thanks for sharing that experience. Yeah. I know we're going really over time. Are you okay with still talking some more?
Yeah.
Cool. I know outside of Gearbox, you also had the chance to work on a big MMORPG called Neverwinter. Can you share a little bit about that experience and maybe some of the effects that you enjoyed working on there?
Yeah, so that was my first game VFX job. So like that was basically like the intro to me figuring out how video games work and what goes into making them. Since I was working on an MMO, it was a lot different than working on a AAA game. Whereas with a AAA game, I can make an effect and work on it for almost a year with the iterating and iterating and iterating, coming back changes and iterating some more. Whereas with the MMO, since they did updates, I think like every week, they were updating the game. So a lot of the effects I made, I have to pull out maybe 4 or 5 effects a day. So it was very fast creation. It wasn't just I could sit there and go, okay, how am I gonna do this and think about it. It was like, okay, make this, and then it goes into the game. Now that wasn't with all the effects, but it was with a lot of the general effects, and even with the character effects, where hey, like they would come down, okay, we have this new mage character, and they have like 5 skills that they're gonna need effects for, and I maybe have like a week to put all those together. And a lot of that was also, and that's not necessarily like semi-scripting. Like it wasn't like hardcore scripting, but you would have to type in rotation, like rotate particle system 90 degrees after 5 seconds, rotate it back the other 90 degrees type of thing. So it was like half scripting and half visual. So it was so I have to kind of jump back and forth between like the technical mind and the artistic mind. Yeah.
That's crazy. It reminds me of a parallel with the film industry and visual effects, because in feature films, you have a lot of time in post-production to really kind of build out those effects. But when you're looking at, TV shows, let's take like Sabrina, for instance, which is out right now, every single week, you've got to, produce, results for the next episode that's coming out. So it's just crazy hearing in the MMO space how quick turnarounds got to go. And I think about this too with any kind of online game, right? So even Valorant's out right now, and there are patch notes that come out like every other week. So that means your visual effects artists are constantly having to make updates and tweaks to existing effects that are needing to be changed on an ongoing basis. So that's really good insight, Ash. You have had the distinct pleasure to also work on animation projects in the commercial space during your tenure at Farm Creative Parlor.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that chapter of your life?
Yeah, so that was the job I was hired for, like right out of grad school. And doing those animations was different because, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, I was now working with a team of people, and I had deadlines. And it wasn't just like it was in school where you're going, okay, well, I'll just kind of work and then, finish this, whatever. It was, all right, this is your deadline. You have to hit this date because the client needs the prints, or the client needs the animation, 2 days afterwards, after kind of put it in post and make it look pretty. So getting into that headspace was very like, oh man, I'm going to have to do a lot of overtime, or I'm going to have to, work late a lot just so I can finish this and get it done. So working there was an experience as just being a professional for the first time and just getting used to being at work on time and hitting the dates that I needed to hit, and getting my models into my 3D models into a certain fidelity, because we had to have these models at 100% accuracy for the client. And I was never really used to that. Like my models in college, they were decent, but it was my level of completeness where I'll look at it and go, all right, this is good. Like I'm done with this. I'm satisfied. I'll turn this in, for my homework. Whereas now that I'm actually working for someone who's paying me, or paying the studio, hundreds of thousands of dollars for, XYZ prints, that model needed to be 100% accurate to the blueprints that were given to us. And a lot of the times it wasn't like we would get just sketches or like a CAD file of things that weren't even finished. So we didn't really have any actual pictures that we could work from. So a lot of times it's, okay, well, the stitching's got to go here. So you have to visualize, all right, how's the stitching going to look? You give it to the client and they go, oh no, the stitching looks more, it's not an inch apart, it's an inch and a half, like the stitches are 1.5 inches apart. So you have to go back and like make the stitches an 1.5 inches apart, because that's how the client wants it,
Yeah, that's so awesome. Like the two big lessons there, right, is You developed a really strong work ethic, understanding that, this is what the real world looks like.
Yeah.
And, if I want to survive, I've got to adapt. But number two, and this kind of ties into the freelance environment as well, but you got to be flexible in, your work assignments, because, things are going to change, and each individual person has their own vision of what this kind of final product looks like. And unfortunately, you as an artist, especially when you go in the commercial space, you've got to learn and build for what the client wants and not necessarily what you want. Sometimes
Right.
you have that flexibility where the client doesn't know what they want, and then you're giving them suggestions until they're like, ooh, that's the one, like it was their own idea.
Yeah, like I actually, like, one of the things that I always think about now is I was modeling his table leg, and it was just a table leg. And the client was in the studio with us, and so I'm the one modeling, and I get the table leg done, and I'm like, hey man, how's this look? And he goes, it's a little less curve on that. So I go back, I make less curve, and then he's like, oh no, a little more curve. And so I make it more curve, and it's like exactly how I had it the first time. He's like, yeah, that's perfect. I was like, dude, really? Like, you made me just go back and work on this for another 3 hours, and now it just looks the same.
Hey, I know we talked a little bit about your time in college, going from a bachelor's in sculpting and then going back to school again for a master's in VFX and computer animation. A lot of people are transitioning maybe in their late 20s or early 30s or even in their 40s, and they're thinking about whether it's worth going back to school for effects. And oftentimes, a lot of us have bachelors in other degrees. Like me, I have mine in theater. What are your thoughts on going to grad school, and kind of how is that different from your first foray in college? And what's some advice you would give people about, higher ed?
So I'm very torn when it comes to going back to school or just going to school in general, where for me, I don't say don't go to school, and I'm not going to say go to school. Yeah, I would say it really depends on the person and how they, and kind of their mind space about school. See, me, my personal life, I don't regret going to grad school. However, if I were to go back in time, I would tell myself, hey man, take out a loan for 10 grand, buy a really nice computer, get a bunch of tutorials, and learn that way, However, being in school, I was able to be around other artists and see how they work, and basically not necessarily compare myself to them, but I would compare myself to them, Whereas if I wasn't in school and I was just trying to learn by myself, I wouldn't have that type of inspiration or competitive nature as, okay, this is what competition when I graduate, I need to be at their level. I get very torn as far as going into higher education. And I guess what it will boil down to is don't go into huge debt going into a grad school or even school in general, because it's at the end of the day, when you're trying to get hired for a job, your school doesn't really factor in as much as you would expect. Whereas a lot of people are still looking at your portfolio and kind of what you're doing and the work that you can produce. Because for example, at my level at Gearbox, I actually look at portfolios and we decide to hire. I'm one of the people that actually looks at and goes, we can hire this person. And a lot of the time, their school, I'm not looking at, what school did they go to? Because I might not know that school. However, if I do know that school, I can go, okay, I know that program that they went through. That's a pretty good program. And I understand where their mindset might be. It's not a really easy question to answer, because on one side I'm going, yeah, you should go to school because there's a lot of good things that you're going to get from school, like seeing how other people work, having that, getting used to hitting dates where things need to work, getting feedback from somebody. Feedback is super important, especially group feedback, being able to talk with someone and say, hey, how do I do this? And they can give you that answer, versus not going to school where you can, save $50,000-$60,000 and kind of learn on your own and make have a really good portfolio and still get a job. I hope any of that made sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, during this work from home period, we are all forced to, even in school, interact online. And we understand that now there has been a growing community for real-time visual effects artists to be able to bounce ideas off of and to get feedback on effects and to, jump onto ArtStation and see all these amazing AAA stuff that people are doing. I think y'all had an art blast for Borderlands a while back. So it was really cool to kind of see some of the effects that set the bar for what aspiring people can hope to achieve someday.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. It's like what you mentioned, working from home, and that's one of the drawbacks from working from home is that when we're in the studio, because all the effects artists, we all sit in the same room, and just being around the other team members, like looking over my shoulder and going, whoa, that is awesome. How did you do that? And then they can show me exactly how they did that. And I'm like, because that's something I was trying to do for this character or this effect. So what you have there, I can use and build off of. Now that we're not all in the same room anymore, it's like, we can't do that. It's more of like, during a critique, it might be, oh yeah, I did this. And it's like, oh man, I wish I would have known that 3 weeks ago because I needed that 3 weeks ago. But now it's like, well, I guess I can use it now. It might be a little late, but it's easier to bounce ideas off each other when we're all together,
Ash, we're about to enter the lightning round, where effects are quick and easy. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do this.
What is a perfect one-day getaway in the Dallas and surrounding area?
All right, so this is a funny question because, like, as a parent of 2 kids, I don't really go out by myself much. So it's like my one-day getaways are all family-based and kid-orientated. But the zoo or the aquarium is always fun. Like the Dallas Aquarium, my kids really enjoy that. My kids really enjoy the zoo, or just a local park. Back before COVID hit, I would take my kids to the park and just kind of hang out there for an hour and a half, let them run around and, burn out energy, take them home, and then they would pass out.
How are you surviving right now with no parks to take them to? They're all energized in the house, just bouncing off the walls.
Dude, it's rough. Like, coming up with things to do every day. It's like we've built obstacle courses in the house. We actually built like a play set in our backyard so they can have something to do, just to run around and get some energy out. But we are fortunate enough that our neighbors have a kid or have 2 kids around the same ages of our kids, and they've been quarantining themselves as well. So basically, like, our neighbors are the only people that we're comfortable with have like our kids being around, because we know, like, all right, you guys have been social distancing the same way we are, so we can hang out with you. And we actually went camping with them a couple weeks ago, so that was a good getaway to just have the kids play, and like we'll go over each other's houses, so like the kids can still, they are doing stuff where they're running around and like playing with each other, but it's like we can't really go anywhere, so it's like just our house or our neighbor's house.
That's good, man. And, next week, 4th of July is coming up. So popping some fireworks. What video game or app are you using on your phone that is the most fun?
All right. So I'm not much of a mobile gamer. I would say most fun app, I have this Brick Breaker game. You just, like, I'll play that, 5-10 minutes. If I need to kill some time, it's you just like shoot the ball up and then you break bricks, that one, or I'll just be on Twitter.
Yeah. What is your favorite thing to cook or eat?
My favorite thing to eat is, I like barbecue. I can't cook it, but I love eating it.
Nice. What is your favorite book or podcast you've listened to recently?
So recently, my favorite book of all time, I was split between like American Psycho or Fight Club. So I've actually reread those a couple times, like not fully, but like I'll just pick one up and like read a couple chapters, like just if I have time. I don't know why, I just really like those books. Like, I don't know what that says about me as a person, but I do enjoy them.
They made a movie off of both of them, right?
Yeah, and like Fight Club was like one of my favorite movies too. Like I said, like, I don't know what that says about me as a person, but like I wouldn't read too deeply into it. I just enjoy them. So, and podcast wise is every once in a while I'll listen to the Joe Rogan podcast. I know he's getting pretty controversial among Twitter now, but I do enjoy some of the guests that he has on.
Yeah. What is your favorite video game effect that you're jealous of that isn't your own?
Let's see. So that would be, like I said, anything water. Anything water related, I'm always like, oh man, I wish I could do that. I would say also Mortal Kombat's blood, gore effects, and other blood effects in those games. I'm really jealous of how they were able to pull that off. Like that was a huge inspiration for how I was doing some of the Borderlands stuff.
Best advice for a first-time visual effects artist or people looking to get into the industry?
So my best advice for that is just to learn as much as you can, get familiar with as much software as possible, because any studio that you're going to apply to is looking for you to know the most recent stuff. You don't have to be proficient at it. I wouldn't say you need to be an expert, but just getting familiar with the most recent software, like the bases, Houdini, Maya, 3ds Max, Photoshop, Unreal, or Unity, just getting familiar with those and being able to prove that you can use them is key. And if you're going to apply to a studio, know what software they use. So don't apply to, a studio that uses 3ds Max and you're only familiar with Maya. Know where you're going.
What question do you never get asked that you wish you were asked more often?
No one ever really asked me how to make a demo reel or how to interview. And I wish people would ask that more, because I've seen some bad interviews and I've seen a lot of bad demo reels. During my class that I teach, there's actually a section, I'll take a day, half a class, and just talk about, here's what you should put in your demo reel. Here's how you should interview. Here's how you should do your resume. And I just give them that advice, because when I was in school, no one told me how to put together my demo reel or how to put together a website. It was just stuff I had learned along the way. And knowing that would be super helpful. For example, if you're putting together a website, have your demo reel easily available. As someone who looks at demo reels when we're hiring people, if I have to dig through your website just to find your contact information or any of your work, I'm not really going to do that. If I can't find your demo reel within a click, then why should I put forth the effort that you're not going to put forth,
Ash, are there any other thoughts or things you want to plug? You mentioned that you have a class that you teach. Are you accepting new signups if somebody wanted to check it out?
Yeah, so I teach at Richland Community College. It's an online course right now. It's Visual Effects 2. It's more like advanced techniques, because I used to teach Visual Effects 1, which was just like an intro class where we start from scratch type of thing. So now I'm doing the Visual Effects 2 online only, and it's kind of like advanced techniques. We do a lot more simulation stuff, which is cool. I still believe signups are available. You'd have to check the college website. But I also have some, since we're plugging stuff, I have some content on the UE4 marketplace if you ever wanted to check that out. It's a lot of the times, I'll give it away for free, because it's if someone would just message me hey man, I saw this content, can I have this? I'm yeah, sure, why not, whatever.
Well, one of the best things about finding content on the Unreal marketplace is that you can reverse engineer them. You can figure out, how did he do this effect, and pick it apart. So I always find that incredibly useful resource for reference.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's good to know. And especially if you're trying to figure something out and you're just oh man, let me just take a look and things like that. Like I said, it's there. I haven't updated much recently because I've just been busy, but it was something I did back in the day. It's all the content's still up there. Yeah.
And if people wanted to get in touch with you, Ash, what is the best way to contact you?
Best way, just through Twitter. I'm pretty open as far as direct messages and mentions and things like that. I'm not super aggressive with comments or anything like that. So it's just, I just use Twitter as a, hey, I'm in a good mood. Let's tweet something happy.
Awesome. Ash, it has been a pleasure interviewing you today. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, thanks, man. It's always good to get out and start talking about effects, man. That's I could talk about effects for days on end,
For sure. What an exciting interview we had with Ash today. He is so talented and professional. I really enjoyed talking with him, and I hope when this whole COVID thing dies down, we can grab a beer somewhere and just hash it out. So, biggest takeaway here, Ash says, is that we need to be learning and constantly learning the tools, because there is no profession in video game development that requires more knowledge on different types of tools than real-time visual effects. So jump into your 3D modeling programs, throw yourself into the particle systems, learn about those material shaders and the simulation software like Houdini, and just immerse yourself in the technology. That said, everybody, until our next episode, rock on.